All right, section two, what factors harm or help a development? In section one, we kind of introduced a developed nations versus an undeveloped nation and nations that are beginning to improve. So in this section, we're going to talk about some factors that can harm or can help in the development of a country. So the first thing we're really going to look at is we're going to focus on population. So just because a country has a very large population doesn't mean necessarily that it's going to have a rapid growth rate. For instance, in this picture here, we find that this is transportation over in India. They have a massive population growth, as we can see, and you would think with that a lot of that would help their economy grow. But in reality, a lot of their economy is quite poor. And just looking at this picture here, their transportation is not up to what it probably could be for this. So Thomas Malthus is an economist we looked at before. He said that population is a concern or an issue for every economy, especially as numbers continue to grow as far as birth rate versus death rate. Migration is another big factor that can tie into this as well. When we had a lot of Middle Eastern citizens that were fleeing their countries to go to more European countries, we're finding that a population growth was becoming an issue for some of these European countries because they could not handle all of the massive amount of people that are coming into their country. So a lot of them were building borders, denying people the right to come into there. And it was a different situation because these countries didn't want to be hurtful or mean to those who have left their homes. But at the same time, these countries were trying to protect their economy from imploding, where it would completely destroy their economy. So there's a lot of factors that tie into population. Why is it such a concern? Well, people are living longer than they used to, which is a good thing. But as a result of that, the economy has to be able to produce more money to be able to provide for their elderly. Birth rates have increased, and childbearing age has grown as well. We see here that there's a challenge, though, for a developing country that is behind. Their countries that are a developing nation or that need to develop, their population growth is 20 times faster than you find a more modern country. So, for instance, if we took Somalia versus the United States, they would have a 20 times population increase than what we have here in the States. We only have a 1.8% growth in comparison to that. So there's a challenge with that for these countries of, okay, your childbirth rate is massive. How do you handle that as far as an economy goes? So there's a big challenge there because they want to make sure there's jobs and resources that are there. Interesting enough, there is some countries that have decided that they want to tackle this increase in population. So what they've actually done is these are countries that are not equal as far as men and women go. What they've actually started to do is provide more education opportunities for women in these countries to bring down the population rate. Just because it's not such a traditional economy, it's more women working in the workforce, having careers, and moving in that direction, meaning that probably going to have a smaller size family. And that's one way of having an opportunity for men and women to decide on what they want to do. So population is a concern. It could be harmful or helpful. Another concern that we have is the physical capital. Lack of technology that is out there, especially for farming industry. I think it was mentioned yesterday that only 2% of the U.S. population are farmers. It's just we don't need as many as we used to because it's not about survival. It's we have the advancement technology. If you've seen some of these farmers, their pieces of equipment are massive, being able to do to 20 to 30 times what a man could do with just a single tractor. So things have really developed there. We've also found that in these developing countries that since they don't have access to this capital or technology, their education is all about survival and not so much about advancing their education. So for instance, if you have kids in these countries, they attend school for a couple of years, but once they hit a certain age, they end up living and working at the house to farm because it's all about survival. That's why it's important for nonprofits to have a piece in trying to help these countries out. So, for instance, Feed My Starving Children. By providing that service, families don't have to focus so much on food, which then allows them to focus more on education and work instead of just trying to eat. Also, malnutrition is a huge part in inadequate nutrition that is available to them. If you're just living on one particular food, let's say it's just rice, where you're going to be very malnourished. Your energy level is not going to be there. You're going to be more vulnerable to disease. So there is a lot of factors that tie into this population and this physical capital education. Another one that we find is the political obstacles that are there. Instability. It's very hard to grow an economy when you have civil war taking place in your country. If we were to look back at the GDP during the Civil War in the United States, we wouldn't see that it was growing very fast because it was so unstable. Especially if you live where it's terrorist-ridden, where you have the possibility of not following these laws that are out there that are ridiculous. Well, there's not a lot of incentive for you to go out and try to improve yourself. You're just trying to survive. So these central planned economies that we find, they're often in poverty because they don't have the structure that we have here. Plus, the governments are corrupt, just hoarding the money. Unfortunately, a lot of money that is donated to these countries is taken by the government and held on to it. If you've ever seen the movie Black Hawk Down, you notice at the beginning of it that there is aid that is being provided to the country there, and the corrupt government, is holding on to all this food, and all the people are starving to death. But in that movie, it shows that these rebels are basically hanging on to it. Anyone tries to reach for it is basically killed. So again, if there's no stability in the political structure, you're not going to see growth. And then also just minorities and favoritism that takes place. Genocide is where they try to exterminate an entire ethnic or religious group. When we look back on history, we think of Nazis and the Jews, genocide of the Jewish population. Genocide still exists today. It just doesn't exist in a European country. It would be in these Middle Eastern countries. People today are still being murdered in the thousands upon millions of people, and we have just kind of accepted the fact that that's just how life is over there. So genocide does exist, and unfortunately it's a problem that will probably never go away, and it's especially on these unstable countries. Another thing that could be a step back for a growing economy is internal financing. So let's say you want to go out and start a business, but you're not able to because you don't have any funds. Well, then generally you'd go to a bank, take out a loan, which would provide money for you, which then would give you the opportunity to go out and start a business. Well, a lot of these LDC countries, they don't have the opportunity to go to a bank because it doesn't exist. So how can you grow anything if you don't have the funds to be able to go out and borrow it to buy what is necessary? There's the old quote of, to make money, you got to spend money. That's true in a sense, which is accurate, especially if you need some fundamental things for it. So internal financing is a big one. There is I think we'll get to it maybe tomorrow, but a nonprofit that is out there that actually their job is to lend money to those who live in poverty. So it's like a $10 loan, maybe it's a $20 loan, whatever it is. It's very minimal, but for these people, it's world changing, life changing, because now they have money to go out and do things. So it wouldn't be uncommon, like the picture that you see there, that is a bank. They got a big old dollar sign out there. They have a laptop maybe or a briefcase, and that's pretty much it. That's all that exists for their banking system. So to have an economy grow, it's very difficult if you have no internal financing. Another piece that really could help development or possibly hurt is foreign investment. Capital that originates in other countries. For instance, Nike. Nike is a big one that has foreign investment in different parts of the world. Making shoes. They've actually had some arguments come against them that they don't pay their employees enough. So they're manufacturing in China. Their employees may not be as well. Or Vietnam is another big one that we see there. Using these resources to tap into cheaper labor. We've talked about multinational companies before, but just the multinational versus the domestic jobs that are out there. So foreign direct investment. A business by investors from another country. Foreign portfolio investment, purchases made in a country's financial markets by investors from another country. So foreign investment. A lot of times when they come in, it does provide opportunity, it does provide jobs. I've heard of some multinationals going into poverty-stricken countries. Not only do they give these people jobs, but they also provide housing, they provide insurance, they provide clothing, everything. They go in and just transform someone that lives in that particular part of the world. So foreign investment. Borrowing and debt and foreign aid is another big one. A lot of these countries cannot survive without foreign aid. Unfortunately, that means there's a lot of debt that's involved with there. So we find that $31.5 billion is given in foreign aid each year to schools, sanitation systems, roads, other infrastructures, and a lot of this money does not have to be paid back. The whole idea is to help these countries become developed, and in return, hopefully, that they'll be friendly to the United States, and as a result of that, we can make more connections. So foreign aid, when we think of countries, we think of Africa as a big one, parts of Asia, Latin America is another big one. We kind of learned our lesson after World War I that you can't just beat a country and leave it alone. As a result of after World War I, we had World War II, and Hitler gained its power. It's no shock that Hitler became into power just because the state that Germany was in at the end of the war. And basically what happened is we kind of all left Germany and said, okay, you're going to pay for the war now. You lost. You get to pay for it. So not only was their country destroyed, they also now had all this debt. And then they had this guy come in starting to make all these promises that you're going to own a house, you're going to own a car, we are going to be a world superpower. And the voice of that was, unfortunately, Hitler, and he did rebuild Germany. Other international institutions that try to regulate and try to help out developing countries is we actually do have a World Bank. A World Bank that is out there. It provides aid to over 100 LDCs. We also have a United Nations Development Program that is out there, where money that is sent to the UN is then given to the UN to decide on how they spend it. Largest source of grant funding is what we find here. So the World Bank, United Nations Development Programs. There's also multinationals that have really taken to this to provide foreign aid for other countries. For instance, Microsoft, Bill Gates, Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, they have done a ton of work over in these developing countries. to rid just simple diseases that can be fixed by vaccines that we have here in the United States. I think, man, I can't remember the amount of income that Bill Gates gives away, but I think it's over 50%, at least over 50% of his income that he brings in actually goes to foreign aid. And there's quite a few billionaires that do this. They do give away a lot of their money, which has really helped in trying to develop some of these countries that are out there. International Monetary Fund. So the purpose of this is to stabilize international exchange rates, offer policy advice and tech assistance, and try to figure out a way to help these countries that are so reliant on other countries for foreign aid. How can they start paying this debt back? What does that look like? How much of it can be forgiven? So trying to create a stabilization. So we go in, we try to stabilize a country, and then hopefully by the time it can start repaying some of its debt, and then we'll have more stabilization. The problem is, though, you have in some of these LDCs is they have civil war. And every time you go in there try to fix it, things seem to just kind of blow up in everyone's faces. For instance, Syria right now is a mess. You have Russia on behind the Syrian country. You have the U.S. who is for the rebels that are in Syria. And how can you really stabilize a country that is that way? There is different types of religion groups, Sunnis and Shiites that are out there. These are both Muslim religions, and they basically don't get along because it's about the bloodline from their prophet Muhammad, or I can't remember the other individual that they mentioned, but the Sunnis and Shiites don't ever get along. That's why we'll never have world peace. It's impossible to have world peace because of religious beliefs. Unfortunately, what has happened is when we've gone into the Middle Eastern countries is the Sunnis and Shiites decided, hey, we're going to join the same forces, and they turned against us. So it's just a mess over there, and it's very difficult to have a stabilization program. And the last slide, NGOs, non-government organizations. This is like the Gates Foundation. Raises money used to fund aid and developing programs. And they have done some amazing work that is out there. Muhammad Yunus, he is the founder of Grameen Bank, and that's that bank I was talking about earlier that gives out loans to poor people, a couple of dollars here and there. There's the Heifer International, I think it's called. They actually give animals in less developed countries to produce and to sell products. So maybe it's a goat, maybe it's a cow, maybe it's a pig, maybe it's chickens. And they can use that to start an income. Of course, we have Red Cross. There's a company called CARE. There's World Wildlife Fund. So there is a lot of NGOs that are out there trying to benefit this. This is where I think it's important that we learn and get a kind of an international viewpoint about these things and how can we have a bigger impact. At the school here, we have Buy a Coffee, Buy a Well, which is a fantastic organization, a group. That's an NGO. It is providing a service to these individuals to help out. That is the end of section 2.